Hello, beautiful friends. This is such a great honor to be here with you in this world, fulfilling this incredible mission. And that mission is huge. And I'm just living in wonder and awe every single day, not only at what we co-create together as humanity in all the different groups in this group, but also at the awe of creation and this huge cosmic story that we get to witness and be part of. Patricia shared, all of us volunteered for this, all of us did. And, some of you might have the memories when you did that, and then how we started to come here and how we were trained for this. I don't remember maybe everything, but I remember a lot. And so I share what I remember. And so it fascinates me, all that led to this, even like this multi-dimensional reality is so fascinating. And again, I just share my little glimpses, and all of you then help me, of course, together put the puzzle pieces together. And so here we are once again. I welcome the presence, the energy of Yogananda, who brings to us the pureness of Divine Mother and Divine Father. This morning, somebody wrote to me a very brief email saying, "So you must think that God is a man." And I'd like to respond to that only from my perspective. I'm not much of a reader at all, and this is by design, but I do like to listen to some audiobooks again and again and again. One of them actually is The Second Coming of Christ, that thanks to Gurge, who is here on this call, who I think studied absolutely everything about Yogananda's writing, and he's like our incredible librarian here. So thanks to Gurge, I discovered my passion for The Second Coming of Christ, and so I've listened to it again and again and again and again online. And the only other book I ever listened to by Yogananda actually is this autobiography of the yogi. And it is by design that I don't know much about his writing really. So what I share here is, definitely not the vastness of consciousness that this avatar had, but the little bits and pieces that authentically come through me really. And so they are useful. So is God a woman? Is it a man? Is it Divine Mother? Is it Divine Father? Is it something else? And so I'll speak a little bit about my encounters with the divine. And then we will also look at today, as I promised, at the structure and the hierarchies of the forces of darkness. So we'll keep a nice balance. So I will be speaking about the forces of darkness, not because it's really, I would say, important, but it's very, very interesting for us to understand what we have been up against for millions of years and what is coming to an end right now. So when I speak, I usually try to go into a little bit of a trance. So I try not to look at the chat. I'm always looking outside the window into nothingness and awareness so that it flows better. And it was my guides in 2020. It was the Hopi people who have been coming to me all my life. And I had a picture here of the Hopi yesterday. And so I'm always visited by the Hopi women and Hopi men. It's both equally. And it's Hopi sisters and Hopi grandmother, and it is the Hopi cousins, and it's the Hopi uncles. And, it's young and old in terms of, really nobody looks too old in the higher realms, but just so that you know. So these beings have been coming to me since the age of 4. In 2020, I got visited by many of them, and they took me back to my childhood when I was again a little kid in Czechoslovakia. And they said to me, "You made a promise." And they showed me apparently a contract that I signed, and they had a scroll with my name on it saying, "You signed the contract and you promised you would be speaking about the divine, but you are not really speaking about the divine." And I used to do workshops, and I used to teach in-person workshops, and I taught, in Encinitas for several years where Yogananda had his hermitage. But then I kind of stopped teaching, and I started to just, do everything for myself and on my own and not really doing anything publicly. So in 2020, the Hopi, they came to me and they took me back into my childhood, and it was an out-of-body experience. And we were going through my room that I had as a child, and they were showing me all the objects that I actually interacted with as a child to bring up all the memories into my consciousness, into my conscious awareness of how I agreed in this lifetime to speak about the divine. And then they played a voice to me on the radio. And it was a voice on the radio, and it was a woman speaking. And we listened to her, and she was speaking about the divine, and we were listening. And I thought, wow, this is so, actually, I really thought that. I was like, this is very beautiful. And they said, well, that's you. And so this is how you will be speaking about the divine. And they said specifically, it will be required of you not to speak on like the internet with the face, with the camera. You will have to speak as a voice. And they said it's not about the quality of your tone. It will not be your voice as like what it sounds like. It will be the divine tone behind it that will be the beauty in it. And they also explained to me that when a person is on camera, there is a lot of focus on looking. Whereas when you are listening to a voice, you are listening to more of the substance in the message. Also, for a person to be on camera, they do focus also on, of course, their person, like I'm in a body. But when there is a voice, we can take away also the body. We can actually do something that is required of all of us as we ascend, and that is letting go of the body consciousness. And so this has served, at least I hope many, since 2020, when there is only a voice and not the body identification, that gets then actually much better transmission from the divine self. Because the divine self does not have the form of the body. The divine self doesn't have a face like we do. And so then the divine self can actually express itself so much better as a tone of divinity. And so that was my story of starting to share. And so what I wanted to share is the first and many encounters with Divine Mother, with Divine Father, but also that which is beyond. And that could be puzzling because, you know, we do wonder, unless we meet the divine face to face, what is it really? And so all I can tell you, that divine can take on any form it feels like. I have encountered the divine first in the guru, and you know, so many different layers to these legions of light. And so you can say the first encounter was, you know, when you meet an angel, then when you meet an archangel. These beings do exist. When you suddenly meet your own divine self, those are all divine encounters. But there are specific layers of divinity, and it actually all, of course, has to blend into one cosmic creation. There's only one cosmic creation, and nothing is separate from it. Not even the beings of darkness, no matter how much they would like to be separate from it, but they cannot separate themselves. It's actually impossible. And so I'd like to think about everything as one cosmos. Cosmos is ever expanding, so you can think of it as a cosmic balloon, and like a party balloon, and it is an ever expanding balloon. So the breath of God is constantly breathing into the party balloon of cosmos, and this balloon is ever expanding for this cosmic cycle until one day it is inhaled back into source, and then a new balloon is starting to be exhaled in the new cosmic cycle. And so we are in the balloon of cosmic creation. This balloon is so vast, and it is also multidimensional. So creation is really fun with all the complexities. But to keep it simple, this large balloon contains many universes. So they would be smaller balloons, but since like a balloon sounds like you could actually be separated within, but it is not. It is simply individualized. And so universes are individualized fields of energy within that cosmic balloon. And then within the individual universes, you have individualized fields we call galaxies. Then we have individualized fields you can call systems that are planetary and solar systems. And so this would be a very simple overview of cosmic creation. So creation is the outbreath from, we can call it prime creator. Now, when we say prime creator, it immediately sounds like a dude. But again, that would be a mistake, or maybe not the full understanding of what the creator is. The way I experienced creator after encounter with Yogananda and then him training me for 2 years to be able to have these perceptions, I experienced what we simply refer to as source. Source is a wonderful way of explaining the origin of this cosmic cycle, because there is a primordial source. From this source, on the outbreath of the source, we have the manifestation, and this is all from my own experiences. I don't try to take anything from the yogic books. This is just what I've seen myself. So I speak about it from my mind's eye. I'm recalling all of this as I speak. And so from the primordial source is the emanation of what we call the divine masculine and the divine feminine. They come out as magnetic forces. They don't come out as beings just yet, but they do have the quality of the yin and the yang. These are the fundamental creative principles behind creation. And then through this magnetic attraction, creation can come into being. These are qualities of the primordial source that obviously then start the manifestation. It comes out as sound, out of love. Everything is actually centered in this great love. And you can say that it's the love between the two principles, the divine masculine and divine feminine. And so as it comes out also as sound, the sound starts to create. And we get the manifestation of different fields of energies that we can call beings. It is not beings with arms and legs and faces and bodies, but eventually creation even creates beings that can have those forms that we identify as humanoid forms. But that's not the only way to exist, of course, in this unbelievable cosmic creation. And so there are then beings that manifest as what we would call Divine Mother. And she can take on so many different forms as well as remain formless. And you would say she's the Mother God. And then we have beings who manifest. For example, I had an encounter with the being we call Shiva. I had an encounter with the being that we call Babaji. And you could say the divine as the Father can manifest in these beings that we are familiar with. So I only speak about the beings that I encountered myself within creation, and I don't have, the comprehensive understanding of all of this at all. But this is just the bits and pieces that I've experienced myself through this lineage. And so definitely I would say, yes, God is a mother, God is a father, but there's also God that is not identified as the masculine or the feminine. This was several years ago, not too long actually, when one night Yogananda approached me, and this is a story I've shared many times, but it's an interesting story, when he asked me to gather all my divine confidence and to command, and this is exactly what he said, command the creator of all of this to manifest to you now. Now, when I spoke it out loud, I said, creator of all that is, creator of all that is, reveal yourself to me now. This is exactly how it was. Creator of all that is, reveal yourself to me now. So I was sitting upright, I was doing my spinal alignment, and I said it. The moment I said it, the creator of all that is manifested itself. That was not the father, it was not the mother. It was something different. Now, as yogis have encountered the creator of all that is in this form as well, they gave this form of the creator a name. And they called the creator of all that is in this form, in this very specific form that I encountered as well, Indra. Now, Indra has been known, through the yogic history, of course. And again, I'm just speaking from my own DNA lineage, where I can gather this information. And then people who are in different genetic lineages, they might describe exactly the same thing in completely different words and also in different imagery. And so that one night I got to actually meet Indra. Indra is known to be a creator, especially in the Bhagavad Gita. Indra is mentioned. There is a dialogue in the Bhagavad Gita, and I think Isabel, I don't know, Isabel, if you're on the call, I haven't looked at the chat just yet, but I have recently started to listen to the Bhagavad Gita as translated by Stephen Mitchell. I'm a huge fan of Stephen Mitchell because to me, Stephen Mitchell is an incredible mystic who actually blessed us with the most perfect translation of the Tao Te Ching that I have ever come across through his own mystical experience and understanding. And so I was so excited to see that Stephen Mitchell also translated the Bhagavad Gita. And so you can listen to it again and again, and we will together study these two incredible, important texts of revelation together. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, there is this beautiful, beautiful communication with really the creator of all that is, and Arjuna. And Isabel told us yesterday that Yogananda actually revealed that he was Arjuna, which doesn't surprise me at all. And so Arjuna is told by the creator of all that is, in all its many forms, that one of the favorite forms the creator takes on is Indra. Now, I learned this really a few weeks ago, and I was just blown away that Indra was one of the favorite many forms of the creator to take on. So I had the incredible honor and really mind-blowing experience of meeting the creator of all that is as Indra. Now, Indra again sounds like a dude, right? Like it sounds like the god Indra. But actually, no. Indra is really a being that is hard to imagine, unless, of course, you see Indra. But of course, Indra has been described by all the mystics who got to see Indra as a field that we could actually call a quantum field, where you see rainbow jewels, truly jewels, interconnected through strings of light. Now, that is a very different way of experiencing the creator than saying creator is a man, woman, or the absolute. It is a field of jewels and strings known to the mystics and as Indra's net. And that is the field of all potentialities for creation. And so those are the several of my encounters with the divine. And so when I speak of the divine, I don't want to limit it to anything at all. And so hopefully these calls that we do here that I record and put on YouTube just allow everyone to keep a very open mind about what the divine is. When I met the Divine Mother, I met her in many of her forms, and ever since, now and again, she pops in her physicality, but actually it's very rare. In 2017, it was a daily occurrence, and for several years after that. But there's also an integration that takes place for the mystic. For the mystic to actually experience liberation, one has to fully embody Divine Mother and Divine Father at the same time through their heart. It can only happen when the heart is fully liberated and open, and when one experiences the greatest love possible. When the heart is 100% open, it is through the laws of this cosmos that Divine Mother and Divine Father come in as magnetic flow into the mystic. They come in, I would say, not through invitation, not through prayer, not through wishing. They simply come in when the mystic, when the sage, when the initiate is ready at the level of the heart. When the heart is 100% open, and to me that can happen through two different experiences, either the greatest love that one feels possible, or also through immense sadness. I always prefer the path of love. But the heart cracks open, the shell we spoke about yesterday, that the Hopi told me about, the purification of the heart. It is truly like taking a walnut and cracking the hard shell around the walnut and then revealing its treasures within. When that experience happens at the center of the heart and it is 100% liberated, this liberating flow of two magnetic flows come. One seems to rise from the base of the spine into the heart, and one seems to descend through the crown into the heart. And again, the yogis describe this as the dance of Shiva and Shakti, and they have all these funny images of, the real like Shakti person and Shiva person kind of in their physical bodies dancing on their head. But again, there's a lot hidden in these depictions. These are actually forces of nature, forces of creation. In Egypt, they were called Neteru. See, and we can actually know them as also Osiris and Isis. These are the same forces, but in a different expression of themselves, simply depicted differently for the different epochs of our evolution. When these two forces come into the adept, they come into that open heart, and just like two magnets, they meet in the heart. And in that moment, the mystic experiences the liberation from this false matrix that was created by the adversary. The adversary is a force that in Hebrew was called Satan. And in the Second Coming of Christ, in the first volume on page 127, you will find all the information about the detail of the creation of the false matrix by this force. This force is what we spoke about as well. And instead of calling it Satan, because that's a big word, we can also simply call it the impure nature. The impure nature, again, was simply, it happened, I would say, by a cosmic accident. And it happened when sound came from the prime source, from the prime creator, from the primordial source. And because sound creates, there was that one tune that simply came out the wrong way. It was off. Now, would you say that that makes God or the goddess source imperfect? No, not at all. And so this one tune, out of all the many tunes, the many frequencies, the many waves that came out, simply just one was off tune. And when something is off tune, because sound creates, it started to create this consciousness, because everything is conscious. So the consciousness started to create what we would call the legions of darkness and the different expressions of darkness. We call it darkness, but we could also call it evil. And so that was the origin of cosmic evil. It didn't happen here on Earth. It happened within cosmic creation. Now, is it bad news? Is it good news? Really, it was just simply a glitch. The way to describe it is that it was a very, very small percentage within creation that was created through this one disharmonious frequency. This disharmonious frequency had the same potential to create, and so simply by its own imperfection, because it was off tune, it was not harmonious, it started to create dissonance, and it was dissonant in its actual expression. And so in this dissonance, it created dissonant beings that we got to know as, the demons, and really its own state as dissonance, described as Satan, turned into just like Divine Mother is the Mahaprakriti, then so Satan became a being within cosmos, conscious being that had the gift to create. And so this being created and created and created. But again, because it's a very small percentage, I compare it to maybe at the most, and this is just my guess from looking at it from this big perspective, at the most, and that's just maybe even exaggerated, 10% within cosmic creation was created through this dissonant frequency, but the 90%, which is absolute the vast majority, was created through the harmonious frequencies. And so we ended up with the pure nature and the impure nature. Now, this year, 2024, is all about integration of the pure and impure nature back into one. This is actually so huge that I cannot think of anything bigger than that. And that, of course, leads to the liberation of this planet and humanity as one of the worlds trapped by this force, and then the different legions within the force. So as I explain, and everybody's familiar with the legions of light, of course, So we ended up with something that we call angels and demons. This is very real and it really happened. And until recently, that was our reality. Now, in the second coming of Christ, which I highly recommend that you explore and that you listen maybe online or you buy the book and you read. Again, it's the first volume. These are big books. And this chapter where the entire false matrix is described starts on page 127, and it's called The Role of Satan in God's Creation. It has a description of the nature and origin of evil, but the information that I share, I don't share based on this book. I share it from my own seeing and knowing, which of course it's not complete, but it's just interesting because then I can speak about it from a personal perspective. And so, I received this revelations, as a yogi. I don't practice yoga like a physical exercise, but, when you do this breathing technique that Yogananda introduced and focusing on the spine and focusing on your third eye and meditating, you simply get into more expanded states of consciousness and even are able to go beyond the physical body to explore creation from a different perspective. And so again, what I see is not the ultimate truth, but this is just how I see it. So the wonderful news is that what I speak about is really the integration of this dissonant frequency is happening and has been happening this year. And this is also the reason why the World Congress on Illumination was the final one, and why Patricia knows that this mission has been accomplished. And she put it into these words. The World Congress on Illumination, after 38 years of working diligently every single year and really day, has accomplished the reversal of the adverse effects of the fall from grace. Now, Patricia explains this with a different story, but also similar, but this is just, again, about perspectives. I always go to Yogananda as one of the greatest avatars this earth has seen, who has been coming here from the beginning of all life to be one of the really guiding beings for the embodiment of life on planet Earth. And so his perspective to me is the highest perspective. Now let's take a look at these forces of darkness that didn't want, because, they couldn't help themselves to be the way that they were. Their originated in the oneness. So when you look at these musical notes, the musical scale itself, actually, then you see this creates the harmony and oneness of all life, when all is in harmony. But the way this was shown to me, and the first time I really saw the details of this, was on 2/2 this year. I happened to end up participating in this amazing, I would say, planetary healing in Sedona on 2/2/2024 with the Hopi people, but also with a group of people who were invited to participate. This was not really a public event, it was a private gathering. And one group went to the front door that in Sedona is known as Palatki, and I was with a group that went to the back door that is known as Honanki. These are actually ancient sites, and they are also open to public, and you can go, but also only the Hopi people can really take you to some elements of these sites that normally are not open to public. And so we were with a Hopi matriarch that some of you met recently, and she was able to actually take us to, actually the fullness of these sites and also explore the fullness of these sites with us. So before I went, I started to receive visitations from the Hopi women specifically. And it was my sisters, and there's always a big family of the Hopi star beings who come. And so they started to give me instructions, and they told me exactly what needs to happen on 2/2 so that we defrost the life force within the earth between these two portals. They told me I have to be at the back door, even though everybody wanted to be at so-called the better front door, which, is more fascinating. And so everybody was so disappointed that when they had to go to the back door. But I was excited when they sent me to the back door. It was not up to us to choose. And so because I knew I had to be there. So when I was at the back door, we were just, standing there and we were doing our meditations. But I had these instructions from the Hopi women how to defrost the energy between these two portals. And so I just did what I was told to do. And suddenly this huge seeing overwhelmed me in a way. And I was able to see the origin of evil in cosmos. And I saw it like this. Originally, when all came out, it was intended for it to come out as sound that would be harmonious and that would be in oneness. So the musical scale, each frequency would be part of oneness. They all would be unique and create unique expressions of life, which also would mean unique beings. But all the beings, of course, would be beings of love and light. What happened through this little glitch is that one frequency was dissonant. And it simply, even though it originated in the oneness and could never actually disconnect itself from the oneness, because that's impossible since we are in the one cosmic balloon, this frequency started to wander astray by its own dissonance. And so it's moving farther and farther and farther away from the consciousness and knowing of oneness. And the farther it moved, the more it felt removed from the oneness of all life. And you can imagine what that would feel like. The farther it went away from its original family, but never ever to be disconnected at the origin, right? It still came from the oneness of all life. But it went astray, 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 not because it was choosing to, but simply it was off. And so it went so far that then it turned back and turned and looked. It looked and it didn't recognize the rest as the oneness from which it came. It looked, and now it felt like it was separate, and yet it could have never been separate. It felt now antagonistic. It now felt that there were two, the pure nature and the impure nature. And by its own impure nature, that we ended up calling Satan and also evil, it had this impulse to actually attack, harm, and kill. This was the impulse, because it felt so disconnected and so off. This is so profound, and it helps us understand the origin of evil. It explains it. To me, it explains it so well. Because of course it was so lost, but at the same time it came from the oneness. And so that was the beginning of actually what today we would call killing and harming. And so you could say that life as impure nature started to harm life as pure nature. And so it started this occurrence within cosmos that we call evil, harm, and also really harming, killing, to be antagonistic, to be against. And what we today actually know so well in this world is the manifestation of this consciousness or unconsciousness. And so this dissonant frequency was the origin of the adversary. It was the origin of what we know in Hebrew and religions as Satan. And then, of course, because it's a creative force, it has free will to create. And because it's off, it's only creating beings that we today know as demons and fallen angels and dark angels and many different layers upon layers. Just like the legions of light, we had the legions of darkness, but not comparable in any way in number. And so the light of God is always victorious. So these beings that were created by this force, obviously you could say it was also through nature that they were created. It was a natural expression of this force, because it was naturally expressing itself as what we would call darkness. So this led to the creation of the false matrix that we have been part of. I'd like to call it false matrix because that's what everybody's familiar with. And so let's explain a little bit about it and how it was created. But the details of it you will find in the second coming of Christ again. So the way that I was starting to see this, especially, through the work of Yogananda, the way he was transmitting this to me, was that Satan didn't want to be part of creation of the light, of really what we would call Divine Mother and Divine Father God, and wanted to create its separate place within cosmos, its own balloon within the balloon, its own dream within a dream. Instead of being part of the nice cosmic dream of love and light, Satan wanted to create its own dream, but it would have to belong to Satan. So egoism, self-centeredness, greed was also the result of this force. So everything that we know in this world that we could call evil is actually originated in this force. So because this force was so selfish and so greedy, wanted to have its own part of creation, it simply created a balloon within a balloon, but a very small balloon within the big balloon. And, we are part of a big universe too, so you can think of just a very minuscule part of creation was separated within the dream of Divine Father, Divine Mother God, which is called the cosmic dream, and it created a dream within a dream. And this dream within a dream is where the earth ended up eventually, after so-called fall from grace. And that would be what we experience, as I remember, in the civilization we call Mu. Some people refer to it as Lemuria. And so for the earth to be trapped, what did it take? We had to actually be trapped by this force to stop evolving, to stop being part of the spiral of evolution, which was the nature of the big cosmic balloon, which kept expanding. The cosmic balloon is still on the outbreath of God, and so the outbreath is constantly expanding creation into more. But Satan wanted to have a little world for really himself. I'm going to talk about him, and hopefully, again, you don't mind me using he and she. It just makes it so much easier to speak about these things. And so, of course, many, many beings were birthed from this force, and they were birthed into what we would call evil as well, simply through their nature, the impure nature. And again, I would say they couldn't help themselves to be that way. And so that's not excusing evil at all. It's simply explaining its origin and then how it then ended up working in this world. And so I don't know how many worlds, but Earth, as far as I can tell, was not the only world that was permeated by this evil force. Because I know when evil actually came to the Earth, it came from cosmos. It didn't originate here, of course, because it's a cosmic occurrence, and also it permeated other worlds. It was more like a virus that actually permeated certain worlds. So we can think about that way. They didn't have their own world as such, but the Earth became one of the worlds that was so perfectly trapped. And so the dream within the dream, the small bubble within the big balloon, became operated by these beings. Saint John Julian, Baba Wamayama, I think he's one of the only people that I have come across online who encountered these beings as well as, of course, Yogananda. He talked about these beings too. But now is the time of revelation. Now we are allowed to speak this. In the past, this would be absolutely impossible. And the past, I mean, until very, very, very recently. So think about all of this in terms of months and maybe only a few years. So this revelation normally would never, ever be possible. And so how did this work then? It was Satan who introduced what we call reincarnation and the wheel of karma, the way that it was trapping immortal souls and keeping them from evolution, from true evolution. It was an illusion of evolution. So all the reincarnations, always coming back to the earth, always going back into this recycling wheel of karma, that became part of many spiritual teachings as if that was actually what God intended. It became such a big part of our also illusionary, teachings, that we would agree to it almost, many of us, all of us, that yeah, reincarnation of course is absolutely natural, that's how it works, it has to happen. But actually no, that was introduced, how to trap immortal souls from evolving. In true cosmic nature, in the dream of cosmos, beings evolve constantly and always progress towards more, just like a seed turns eventually into a tree, and the tree keeps growing, and the tree keeps giving its fruit. But here it was constantly being a seed, and as soon as you started to sprout, this force would come and crack down on us, and again send us back, send us back, send us back. So the only option was to actually crack the code, and that would mean personal ascension. Personal ascension, it was really only a few managed to do that through incredible effort to go against the design of this world. And so you can imagine it was like a firmament around the earth that was actually reversing the light and turning everything that the divine originally intended for this earth, because originally the earth was actually part of the cosmic dream. She was not separate from it. And so this firmament around the earth that I can describe as really, a little balloon within which is the tiny little dot of the earth, it was reversing everything that the original design was. So some people call it as reversal, and that's a really good way to describe it. So everything that the divine design was reversed by Satan to actually create this really very profound, intricate trap for these immortal beings that you and me are. And again, very few manage to escape it. So death seemed like a process through which people escape this trap, but that was not true at all. Death, for just a normal, typical human being, was simply going from the dot of dust that we call the earth, still within the little balloon that we call the false matrix. And so even the fourth dimension that we call the astral sphere was still operated, not all of fourth dimension, but the fourth dimension that we call the astral sphere was also operated by Satan and all the demons and all the princes of darkness. Hopefully this all is just interesting, because this should not be anything that would make you feel bad or this is not scary. This is what all of us have gone through. So to me, this is just the purpose for sharing this so openly this time. It's just for our understanding of what we are emerging from and why this is the most profound time of our lives that we came here for, and how this is so huge in terms of millions upon millions of years of existence on this planet, and how from the recycling system we have now stepped into evolution. So it's actually very exciting and very, very empowering. And so if anything, this is an expression of actually gratitude for you to be here now, to be able to conquer something so intricate and so artificial and unnatural. This was unnatural. Evolution is natural. Nature is natural. She evolves. She moves in cycles, but never to be recycled back again and again the same way. Always novelty, always expansion, always expanding into more, always giving the seeds to new consciousness. And so you can imagine how unnatural, and that's why some people distinguish this as the inorganic reality versus organic reality. And so we are stepping now into the organic reality. It is still a dream, but it's a beautiful dream. It's a beautiful dream within which this virus has been integrated back into Maha Prakriti. And so, how did this work for us here on planet Earth? When the beings died, let's say you and me, we came here, we died, and we were sent into the astral sphere, which was artificial. It again, we would have all these guides that were artificial, created by the being that, let's not repeat the name too often, because why? But it was the force simply that was impure in its nature. So this force kept then forcing us with this the trickster. It was tricking us so much. People call it the false light. So the false guides in the astral sphere would be sending us back again and again and again and again, always having more lessons to learn, but never being liberated. And again, Yogananda is, you can call him our divine father in this reality if you feel like it, because it's a very appropriate, actually, way of referring to him and relating to him, and also loving this being for who he truly is and has been. Now and again, great beings like Yogananda and the great avatars would embody here on this planet to try to crack the code, to try to bring as many beings as possible out of this slavery. And for example, Yogananda did that, of course, through the teachings of Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga was a method that would realign the spine despite the prison. And the prison, of course, had a misaligned spine. So the fact that the earth had a misaligned spine, it was actually part of the Satanic design actually here on planet Earth, so that we no longer can be part of cosmic creation, so that we no longer perceive our own divinity truly. We were given a lot of false teachings, of course, that again just, made us feel like everything's okay, but it wasn't. This force was so well hidden by its own design because the idea was no one should know about this. So the truth had to always be massively hidden so that this force that was actually using technology to create this false matrix would never actually, they didn't want to be seen, they didn't want to be identified. They didn't live here on planet Earth physically, but they operated through the physical body. If we speak about the force of Christ, we also have the force of Antichrist. Antichrist wanted not our souls, but actually in this world, our bodies. And so the body became actually a tool for Antichrist to operate in this world. And so you know how the body got degraded through this force. And then all the spiritual teachings, they started to refer to the body as a problem, as a sinner, even as really a part of us that was impure, as part of us that was really leading to sometimes very problematic consequences through the attachment to senses, through desire, which was sensual, through attachment to all the senses you can imagine, but mainly, of course, through sexual desire, and then all the different expressions of that desire. And all of it, again, it was true. This force did possess the body, and the body became incredibly degraded to that state that we became familiar with, and it became the status quo, and we would call it normal. So then the birth that we experience, the death we experience, very often the disease that people experience, the pain and all of it associated with the body, all of it actually was part of this anti-Christic design. So the body became a way to actually operate in this world for these forces. And at the same time, you still had your immortal soul. You also still had your eternal divine self. But the access to the soul and the divine self was very, very limited. And it would take an incredible effort to actually restore access to the divine self, all the way to the top, to the spirit level, through the soul. And so we operated here in this world, in this illusion, so blinded by this birth and death and all the in-between, calling it our life. We got so attached to it because, of course, it became our again and again and again and again repeated experience. And so it became so normal that no one or very few questioned how it all came into being. We started to celebrate birth. We started to get really sad when people died. Nobody wanted to die. And all of it became part of this prison. Total brainwash. At the level of the fundamental really existence of us, we would have to question everything about our entire life at this moment of liberation from this illusion. And we could say none of this was real. And the only real element of us has always been the divine self and our soul on the soul plane. It's kind of crazy, right? But it's amazing. And so we are now part of this ascension where no longer will we continue like this. There was a time, and this is what Yogananda speaks about, I cannot tell you from my own experience, but apparently there was a time when God wanted to step in and say, okay, no more, and try to dissolve the earth partially through floods, which I got to experience the flood of Atlantis, but also, we flooded also Mu. And so apparently God wanted to step in and dissolve the earth partially. But then apparently, according to Yogananda, God said, hang on a second, what about free will? I gave free will to everything and everyone. I can't just step in and do this. So let it take its course. So that's just to quote Yogananda. So now, what happened within this false matrix, completely operated by these beings. Again, please go to the YouTube channel of John St. Julian, Baba Wamayama, if someone can put it in the chat. I'm still not looking at the chat so that I can continue this transmission. But John absolutely met these beings and they interfered with his life. Now, I experienced massive interference from these beings. The more I meditated, the more I got to know them. The same, of course, happens to everyone who is on the mystical path that has some kind of gravity. So I moved to Cyprus, which is a small island in the Mediterranean, and little did I know that apparently it was part of Atlantis in the ancient times. But I was called to move to Cyprus. Now, when I moved there, I was teaching meditation and I was doing workshops every weekend and I was teaching the light body. And as I was teaching the light body, one night I experienced something that was really new to me. And I was visited by what I would call a demon in my bedroom after I taught the light body class, where so many people in Cyprus were resonating with the teachings of the light body and activating the light body. And this demon took me by my physical throat, really. And just like in the movie, it was like a horror movie. And it pushed me up the wall and left. And that really shook my world. Because until then, I thought love and light, all the beings of light, all the angels. How could anything like this ever happen to you? And so that was my little introduction. That was really nothing compared to what followed. So, whoa, I thought this I really never expected, but it was not like there was no follow-up after this. So I kept teaching the light body, and then eventually I moved to Encinitas and I started to teach very simple workshops, about angels, because that was my reality. And then I met Yogananda. When I met Yogananda, I was studying with him for 2 years in Encinitas. He was manifesting in his physical presence, and I received an initiation from him. An initiation was the rewiring of the nervous system that he transmitted through the crown with his hands, and he was transmitting really the electricity of God into the nervous system, which today, we can call it like awakening of Kundalini and many different names, but really it was a transmission of divine electricity into the brain centers and into the spine, which obviously changes your perception. one of the elements of the fall in which we were trapped into this reincarnation recycling system within the false matrix was that our brain centers had to actually be degraded, and that we disconnected through our physical body, mainly from our right hemisphere. And that so many of us started to just be out of balance by only using one hand, which led also to the degradation of our brain centers and our ability to operate with a whole brain and to perceive these higher realities. So as we became just one-handed, really, using mainly one hand, and we would say again, that's normal. It was far from natural. Natural, just like we have 2 feet, 2 legs, we use them equally, it would be to use 2 hands, 2 arms equally. And that's why we develop things like Qigong and yoga, trying to restore the physical body to its at least similar to original functioning. And so spirituality, some of the teachings and techniques, of course, led to the liberation of the physical body from this Antichrist energy in the body that was blocking it from its divinity. And so the transmission of this divine electricity into the nervous system led to the restoration of the brain centers that, obviously yoga leads to when it is practiced, with this depth of obviously guidance that Yogananda gave us through the Kriya Yoga, for example, and the liberation of the body from this false matrix. Now, can you be liberated in the false matrix? Absolutely. But what happens when you are liberated? Just like in the movie The Matrix, it's exactly the same. Neo is liberated within the false matrix from the false matrix. And we call it then, for example, like, we have so many beings. Yogananda was a liberated being within the false matrix, which was enslavement. His entire lineage of all his gurus, Babaji, Jesus, those are beings. And of course we had, female representatives as well, and so many of them that we don't even know, but these are just examples of what we know. Ananda Mai was a liberated being within the false matrix. So and Kalashvar. So many liberated beings were able to enter the false matrix. And as you know, from what I have shared previously, one of their goals, they had 2 goals. One goal was to realign the spine of the earth so that she can again be part of divine reality and liberate us actually from the false matrix. But the other goal that they had was to liberate as many beings as possible from this false matrix through self-realization and actually being able to transcend the false astral sphere. Now that was really hit and miss, and I don't know how many managed, but I cannot imagine too many. But again, now and again we would get these masters. At least one would be here present on the earth. There was a time when there was no way that Satan could be defeated or integrated back into oneness. And so even in the second coming of Christ, Yogananda was told, and he spoke about it himself, he too said the same thing. Let's not worry about it too much. There is really not much we can do. And that was true until this year. This year, everything has changed. And so think of yourself as a freedom jumper, the one who jumped into the false matrix to be liberated, to remain liberated, but also to bring liberation to others, but fundamentally to bring liberation to the earth, to burst the bubble of the false matrix. And it's not so much through war. The war, is an expression of unconsciousness. So when we speak about a battle between the angels and the demons, that battle actually took place until recently in the astral realms, in the 4th dimension. It was as real as it gets. And you would be surprised if you haven't seen it yourself. Some people, of course, have been able to perceive it themselves. And so it was something that I would really describe as science fiction. and something so unimaginable that it really, everything to me is unimaginable. Everything I'm describing is really unimaginable, but here we are, and we have been part of this, so it's good to speak it out, because now is the time to speak it out. So in the second coming of Christ, Yogananda said, don't worry too much about it, there's nothing we can do about it. But that's not true this year. This year is the integration of this one dissonant frequency back into the oneness of Mahaprakriti. In the Gnostic stories, if you are a Gnostic, if you are familiar with the teachings about Sophia as the Divine Mother instead of Shakti, and instead of the Hindu tradition, which really is not Hindu, but was known by what we call Hindu, it's actually cosmic tradition. So there are also Gnostics who describe the same story in their own words, with their own names, as the story of Sophia, in which Sophia, as Mahaprakriti, accidentally creates archons as the impure nature that, again, here I refer to as Satan. So they simply call it differently, and they call it the archonic force. Same story, same thing. And so it's nice to find the validation, of course, in all the stories around the world. You can find these stories also in many different traditions where they spoke about the twins, the one pure twin and one impure twin, and so on and so on. It's just the same again. But again, the great, amazing, unbelievably incredible news is that this is now being integrated. So the idea was that as this force was so lost, it believed itself to be separated, but it originated in oneness. So to fight it was not the answer. The answer was to always be connected to the oneness of all life and never ever step into the actual separation. So separation, even though it was an illusion because it was seemingly so, was never the true reality within the cosmic balloon within which all is one. And so fighting it was never the answer. But being who you are, I am that I am, and you can only be the oneness of all life who is represented within you through your divine self, was the only answer to all of this. But then having healthy boundaries, just like Jesus had, and saying, Satan, get behind me. Knowing that the light of God is always victorious, and that Satan was a lost frequency, but also to be found, which just happened. Since this force permeated our world, it permeated everything and everyone, really, and it was operating through the physical body, through the five senses, and gave us the false identity created through the illusion of the birth, which seemed very real, of course, the biology that was degraded to kind of being almost animalistic, to feel separate in our physicality, to identify as a woman, as a man, as a young person, old person, sick person, healthy person. And it created actually an incredibly intricate system of false duality, which created the pendulum of the mind that simply had a hard time to stop swinging from right to left, from good to bad, from I like it, I don't like it, the judgments, the dislikes, the preferences. And you would think, because everything became our status quo, we are speaking about millions of years. So it was hard to liberate yourself from millions of years of this imprisonment and the culturalization of us. Everything was actually permeated by this force. Everything on this planet, except for that one thing, which is the pure divine self. The divine self could never, ever, ever be made imperfect by this force, because the divine self is not actually embodied here and hasn't been embodied here, because it always remains one with God, one with Source, and it never is changed by the experiences that we've had here on the planet Earth. And so this force permeated every system that we have, our bodies, our minds, our identities, and it wanted us to feel so separate. And it actually created many beings of itself. The The different manifestations that I speak about are the demons and the archangels of darkness and, the dark ones and the many different layers upon layers. But it's good to understand what their desire was. These beings in their nature, and I got to meet so many of them, the more again I practiced, and especially when I started to leave my body and I was able to get into beyond the, I was able to burst through the false matrix through chanting Om. Om, I knew, I had instructions for this lifetime. And so the instructions for this lifetime were really clear to me. And it was important to really hold on to them dearly, because we here were poisoned through every single thing you can possibly think of, even our air and water and food and culture and emotions and the mind, schools. And it was a poison that was physical, but also non-physical. So this poison had a very important role to play in holding us here completely degraded as much as possible. But why? And you, as a good being, as one who loves and, is so loving and kind and only is centered in oneness, you would wonder, how is this even possible? And have you ever met anyone who has truly evil consciousness? I have. People who actually even enjoy killing. There are such people, of course. And so if the pleasure can be found in killing, then this force is the origin of that. Pleasure in pain, pleasure in suffering, pleasure in killing, pleasure in harming. And it's very foreign to you and me, of course, but that's how that force manifested here. It had pleasure in all these discordant experiences. And the more, the better. Now, since the force knew that we actually are the children of God, and again, forgive me if God sounds like a man, but I want to say children of the divine, and you know exactly what I mean. The force knew that it had trapped children of God. And at its core, this force actually hates or hated God. After all, we call it the adversary. It was filled with hatred. It didn't want to be part of the divine creation, but actually, once again, it originated in it. And so with this hateful energy, everything that it created was to express its hatred, envy of the divine. It sounds a little bit like a fairy tale, but it is kind of like a cosmic fairy tale coming to an end. And this is the happy end that the yogis knew this would happen. And this is the lifetime when it happens. And this is the year when it's happening. I will look at the chat later, but I still need to be looking into nothingness to be able to transmit the end of this. So if some of our friends can keep monitoring what's going on, and I don't know if anything at all, but this force created several and many beings that would be in charge of this world to operate the system as their kingdom, as their world. And again, I don't know how many other worlds fell to them like this, like we did here, but they were introducing poison by poison by poison, and they enjoyed seeing us suffer. Suffering was actually introduced, and this might be shocking to some of you, as an unnatural occurrence into this system. And it was originally like a program created by this false matrix, within which actually technology was used to transmit suffering as a computer program that would simply run into our fields. And at that point, our fields would be so depleted, because most people are 100% depleted. They operate here as if they are alive, but actually they don't have the juicy apple of the light body. The light body is our electromagnetic field that can only be generated through true love for the divine, or true love for life with a capital L, which means not the conditions in this world. There's a big difference between cosmic life with a capital L, which is eternal and infinite, and we are part of it as our divine self, and also the different manifestations of our divine self through different multidimensional embodiments. And then the life here, which is defined by the birth, introduced by Satan, by death, introduced by Satan, and all the in-between that was really permeated by this virus. And so the love for the truth, which is outside of this realm, and here only represented through the avatars that came here to actually liberate us from this virus. The truth is that life. That's why Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And all of this, of course, had to be coded. None of this was ever to be exposed in the plain sight, because the virus would have killed it. It was very intelligent. The virus was incredibly intelligent. We cannot ever say that Satan was not intelligent. It actually was divinely intelligent originally. And unfortunately, in its dissonance, this intelligence was also used to actually be so pathological. And so this force could never be fought against. But the only way to be free from it was to be 100% in love with God. 100% all the time, in every thought, in every feeling, in every action, in every word, to always be in love, massive love, not a little bit, but I mean mega devotional love with the divine in any form, including the Guru, including Mother Nature. Even nature was degraded by this force in this world, to a point where animals started to eat each other, where humans started to eat animals. All of that, of course, including the physical body that we spoke about, which was massively degraded by the Antichrist energy, because it really just needed the physical body to express its own evilness into this world. It needed the body. And so that's how it became attached to us in this physical world through the body. So to me, it's a little bit, I always say, in the lightwork community, I don't think that we knew about all of this. And so we didn't know what we are up against. And so also, a lot of things got hijacked. So sending love and light, I think, is a great idea. But this required mastery. This was a war we didn't know that we were part of. But again, a war that didn't require fighting, but an incredible steadiness within our hearts. Love for the divine creates an electromagnetic field around us. And this electromagnetic field can expand and expand, expand to actually not only embrace the entire earth, but also beyond, and to eventually pierce through the false matrix. It requires energy. And the energy is that love. That was the only way to actually stay sovereign. So true freedom was an illusion. Freedom was an illusion. True freedom could only be gained if a being was fully 100% all the time, with every thought, every feeling, every word and action completely centered in God consciousness. And how many of us probably never got to experience that? I'm speaking for myself. It hasn't been easy to hold on to the divine all the time. And how many times personally it was just like not even happening. But trying our best is what got us through this. And now we are here. Together we tried our best, did our best, and here we have it. Amazing results. But this electromagnetic field was everything. The electromagnetic field is our toroidal field that is only generated through love in the heart. It is not generated through a prayer. It is not generated through word. It is not generated because we are in church or a temple. It's not generated because we have an altar. It's not even necessarily generated because we are meditating. It is generated only when we feel massive love as a state of being, and not only as an emotion, but as a state of being that is permanent. And so then we had all the tools that were helping us to generate the state of feeling. For example, I have an altar, you have an altar. And so at the altar, we have pictures of who knows what, right? Divine Mother and maybe Yogananda. And these were tools to serve us to generate that incredible love that brings us to tears of joy, tears of honor, humble tears, where we feel so honored to be part of the creation, the big cosmic dream of our Divine Mother, Divine Father God. And so all these tools around us, the mantras, the prayers, tools to generate love, tools to be in love, reminders. So as these beings operated this world, they created disease, they created actually war. War is created by them, and they always manipulated us from what I would call the invisible realm, so that nobody knows they exist. And also there is no way that our governments knew, but they would manipulate individuals because no one had this electromagnetic field unless they were like Yogananda, who was generating it every day, twice a day through Kriya Yoga. The Kriya Yoga technique by Yogananda is to generate this magnetism within the spine through the love, through devotion, through bhakti, to create the protection at all times. The goal was not to be protected. That is just a response and reaction. The goal was to be sovereign, to be free inside the prison, and to never become one of it. So the same with Jesus, of course, be in this world, be in the false matrix, but never become part of it. Same thing. And so the only way to do that is not through the mind, but it's actually through the heart. And that's why we had so many teachings about the importance of love. Loving kindness generates this field. So only in this electromagnetic field we could be free. And again, very few were able to generate it all the time. And so we became shriveled apples. Instead of the juicy apple of the electromagnetic field, we became shriveled. When we became shriveled, mainly through our mind, which actually was influenced by these artificial programs, constantly emanated to us to keep us in the illusion of who we are not, then these electromagnetic frequencies could reach us because we were depleted. We were depleted through the monetary system. We were depleted through the conditions. We were depleted through relationships. We were depleted through childhood and trauma. And food and air and all of it was by design not to kill us. The goal was not to kill us. The goal was to keep us trapped so that we, as the children of God, keep generating a false reality for the pleasure of this force that was so selfish, so greedy, so disconnected, and wanted out of selfishness its own world, didn't want to be part of the big cosmic bubble in which it would had to be one with all and only create love and light, only create beauty, only create perfection. And so this force designed imperfection, and because of its own distortion, it delighted in imperfection. Again, completely foreign concept to us who love life for what it really is. And so it created imperfection. Imperfection became actually a generating principle for this world to keep going the way it was going and to be trapped. Because there was false duality of good and evil, of good and bad, of ill and healthy, of poor and rich, and so on and so on. it was constantly making our minds, our creative minds, it was making them to swing from right to left, from good and bad. And through the swinging of the pendulum, this reality was perpetuated through our own creative force. So we as creator beings, the children of God, we're here creating imperfection. And when we saw imperfection, we didn't like it. And we wanted perfection. But we got so trapped in this. I don't like it, but I want the other thing. And it was simply perpetuating this false reality. The pendulum that kept swinging from the likes and the dislikes, from the pain to pleasure. And that explains to us so well why the yogis, when they figured all of this out, they could see through all of this. They said, oh, please be still. Think nothing. It's going to be so much better. Because if you think something within this false reality, and you will think in terms of duality, you will just perpetuate it. And so that's why we had to center ourselves in the 0 point, which was the only way out of the false matrix. And so meditation became the tool out of this matrix. And of course, it required incredible mastery of completely silencing the mind, opening the heart. So it was a combination of the two. The yogis were telling us things like, don't mind the death at all. It's actually wonderful, but it's not going to take you too far, because all where you will go, you will just anyway end up in the lower astral sphere or the higher astral sphere. It doesn't matter, but anyway, coming back here because of the energy that you own in this world. We are all responsible for energy, and all energy eventually is seeking to be resolved in love. When energy was unresolved, we called it the karmic liability, but let's call it just energy. Energy that has our signature on it. We signed off of it on it. We said, this is my signature. I inhaled it, I exhaled it. And so if the energy was unresolved, it was calling us back. So it was again this really intricate system of really no escape. And so the energy was calling us back, and so we had to come back to resolve all energy into love. As Patricia says, loving all life free. In a way, there is no enemy. In a way, pleasure cannot be found in this world. In a way, satisfaction cannot be found in this world, because this world still, as we see it today, is the result of this false matrix, even though it is falling and very big elements of it have already fallen. And that's why so many people are having multidimensional experiences we are awakening. And so the pleasure and pain was by design. And again, it became so normal to us. Of course, I prefer pleasure. I don't want pain. I want to be healthy. I don't want to be unhealthy. But this constant duality was perpetuating it. And so again, the only way out was nothingness. Sorry, I need some water. The Tao Te Ching speaks about nothingness in the most profound ways. The nothingness was the exit, the 0 point, the Christ consciousness. It's what it is. It's just different expressions of it. But when one became completely indifferent to this matrix, with its pleasures and pains, with this joy, even joy within the matrix as we know it, was actually problematic. Because the only joy that was not problematic was the joy of the divine self, as a quality of the divine self. But joy gained from, something that the Matrix has to offer is just like in the movie The Matrix. If you know, there's that one guy who just, doesn't want to be outside the Matrix because he wants to be in it. The Matrix was designed to be full of pleasure. And so the only way out, truly, was to be completely indifferent, as if we are watching a movie that cannot affect us. And that was the hardest thing, because as this movie was playing out in front of our eyes, and our five senses were actually part of the trap, that's why we were reacting to this reality as if it is real through our five senses. Because if you have five senses, the way that we've had them until recently, and they will be changing, then it is through the five senses that this matrix seems so very real. Again, the yogis invented an amazing technique, or they discovered an incredible technique, in which, through profound concentration, one can withdraw from the five senses. And I've heard some people tell me, like, why would you do that? It's so wonderful to touch and smell and taste. Yes, it is. But not as part of this false matrix. Because then everybody identifies with the five senses, with what they see, what they hear, what they touch, what they smell, what they taste. And that keeps them here in this trap. So the yogis discovered that if you actually, through incredible amount of concentration, focus, and power of your mind, your higher mind, withdraw all five senses, you turn off the matrix. Because how could you see it? How could you feel it? How could you taste it? How could you hear it if you are able to switch off all five senses? So this is what Kriya Yoga will do when it is practiced at this level of mastery. It will allow you to perceive what is beyond the matrix. Again, this could have never been revealed in its fullness until very recently, because the operators of the system have fallen. And you can imagine how much resistance there was, because this is millions of years of their making. These beings enjoyed keeping us disempowered. And I said today I'm going to be revealing this, so it's a big story. But again, this is optimistic, so hopefully everybody's feeling the optimism of all of this and the positive news in all of this. And hopefully it's making sense and explaining why does God allow suffering? Why is there suffering? And as you know, God always says, what does life and death have to do with light? It is not real, but it seems so real, of course. The body became so degraded that it was experiencing life and death and pain, which was introduced, of course, by Satan. And it was all just meant to be quite painful, but also even the pleasurable experiences, the riches, the monetary system, the greed, the wars, everything was actually influenced, of course, by this force and all the many different aspects of it and the manifestations of it. There was a being that I call the chess player. It was one singular being behind the scenes, and this being was playing kind of chess. And the chess was moving all the bits and pieces of humanity to dislike each other, to create war, to create conflict, to have, all the wars we know, to create enemies, to make the families, very small units, so that family against family, sometimes even family against a family member. So all of this was by design, operated by the chess player behind the scenes. This chess player to me is a being that didn't look humanoid at all in any way. And this being simply was making moves. And the moves were always to lead to more separation, to more suffering, to more stress. And definitely it's beyond our governments, beyond our military. They were just part of this game and they didn't know. Nobody really knew. I don't know that many beings knew, but a very, very few. It is sad that maybe a handful of people on this planet knew about this. So this was an explanation of what actually happened until now. You know, I encountered these beings when I experienced the liberation from the Matrix in 2020 through my own divine self. As many of us, and maybe all of us in this world, we started to actually receive an incredible intervention. This intervention accelerated after 2018. So in 2018, we started to receive an incredible intervention from our divine self. Incredible intervention. I started to receive, and usually it happened during 8/8, during the Lion's Gate. The Lion's Gate is a portal. It is not only open on 8/8. 8/8 is just the peak of Lion's Gate. It actually is open several days before and several days after, and it closes usually on August 12th. So some of you also entered into this world through the Lion's Gate. It's a very important portal, but it started to change around 2018 during the Lion's Gate, and then 2019, and then the peak of it was in 2020. In 2020, the Lion's Gate became completely transformed. And so that's what happened to me, and I know many of you, of course. I received the fullness of my divine self on my birthday, actually during the Lion's Gate, and in 2020, the entire structure descended into my being, and of course it transformed, you know, everything. And so when that happened, I also started to receive, you know, the introduction to the forces behind the scene. And so I got to meet so many of them. As Yogananda said, he says in the Second Coming of Christ, every mystic who liberates themselves within this matrix is always, immediately, I would say, met by the forces I have spoken about, and not just all the different manifestations, but also the big boss that we called Satan. And so that's exactly what happened to me. And that's the only reason why I can speak about this, actually. And again, this is just, you know, past. So, but hopefully this was actually useful, just to understand how new is this world right now. This is so new that you can truly now go into just creation. This is the true freedom now. Now we have free will. We didn't really have free will. We did have somewhat, little bit, something, little dose of it, but not really. Now is the free will. Now is the time for complete purity of your being. Now is the time for the purity of the body, of the senses. Now is the time to let go of the old habit, of the old matrix, because now is the new, and some people call it like organic matrix, you know, creator, I don't even know what people call it, but now is the new reality. So now it's about, again, nature, us within this amazing nature, liberated back to our immortal selves, which is our divine self. So I felt called to share all of this so that we know how now is no longer yesterday. How there is no reason to be in the energy of the false matrix, even though maybe billions of people still will be choosing it as a habit, because habits are strong. And so the rewiring of the brain is very important. We will together again work with the videos from the World Congress, but the last video where the Company of Heaven came forth and each one of them was visualized and transmitted incredible energies. One of the things during that video, what happens is the rewiring of your brain centers back to this wholeness. And so that is something we will do. So this week, we will meet again on Wednesday. Don't worry about feeling stuck. No more stuck. This is the true, for the first time, planetary liberation. And together we will move through this. Because of course, I understand the human condition just like you do. We have been part of it, to get a taste of it, to learn how to operate. We had to come here, you know, to learn. You don't want to come here for the first time to be the freedom jumper and not know how this illusion operates. I remember when I was coming here and my guides were, you know, on the firmament, because of course there is a firmament that was keeping the false matrix separated from the true divine reality. And they said, "Oh my gosh, you're going into the gas chamber." And they were actually speaking really about the quality of air, the element of air that was by design poisoned by these beings. By design, we didn't have clean air. And of course, you know, all of it. So I remember, you know, having to come here to adjust to this condition, just like you did. And so together now we're going to be moving out of the habit together, because that's the only way, right? Because this time it's really, you know, it's amazing, really, really amazing. Yeah. So now let us move forward. So on Wednesday, we will meet again. If someone can put in the date on Wednesday. So what is it? 19, 20, 21st. Is it the 21st of August? So I'm looking at the chat now because now I don't have to transmit what I was transmitting, but I wouldn't know. Did you guys enjoy? Was it useful? Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I know it's big. I know it's big. And only now it's really, you know, this is the only time we can do this without really being killed by the Matrix. Wonderful. Thank you guys. It means so much. Because it has to be useful. If it's not useful, then what's the point, you know? Doesn't matter if someone knows something, but if it's not useful, why even say it? So I truly believe this is useful because it has been so useful to me. That our bodies has been liberated step by step since 2020. Since 2020. 2020. And please share this video once I post it, because I think, I don't know, I'm just humbly saying, this is a great explanation of what happened on planet Earth over millions of years and why this is the moment to be free. So I'm gonna post it on YouTube like I always do these days, you know, a little bit more diligent about this. It's gonna be on YouTube. So in 2020, just because we're recording it, I just want to add to this. In 2020, the incredible intervention of our divine self came, where the body was started to be purified. The body started to be purified so that it once again be a vessel for the divine self to shine its light through without the degraded senses, degraded nervous system, degraded cells and molecules. So since 2020, you can see in this world the purification of the human vessel from all that we have spoken about. The body will be that. I put it in the email what Gurga told us. I don't have my phone. I do, actually, sorry. I want to say what the body now will be for all of us. So I put it in the email what Gurga told us, the beautiful story of Yogananda. And so this is such a great story if you look at the little email. And that is that the saint said to Yogananda when Yogananda was 13, your body is God's temple, sanctified by prayer and meditation. And then he told him, never forget that you are one with Maha Purusha, attained only by those who are supremely successful in meditation. So you have to think about it. This Maha Purusha, to me, is the divine self, is the ultimate self. It's the one self that we all originated in, the great self that we know as our divine self. And so Yogananda's body was sanctified by prayer and meditation. And so this is now what's happening here to all of us through our divine self, the sanctification of our body as a planetary experience for humanity. Isn't that amazing? And so the body is being liberated from this possession that it had to experience for so long. since really the fall. And so it is. And so it is. And as Yogananda always said about his divine self, be thou with me always. And so throughout the day, remind yourself of a few things as always. You are a walking field of solutions. You are now a living, breathing being. And may the divine self be with us always. And so it is.